Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, we got a very special guest. Well, there are always special guests on this show, but very excited to have this guy on. I definitely think we'll have a great talk and might even have him on again in the future. But before we get to that guest, let me announce the other rejects and the special guest we got with us today. Judith, we got Judith the Loon. She's back on again with us. What is going on, Judith? How are you?
All right, I'm Judith the Loon. You could catch me on YouTube under the Loon and on X as the Loon at the Loon 50. Thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And we got my man Jin the Ninja. What's going on, sir?
What is up, boss, Mr. 93? So, okay, what do I do? So I have a show called Threshold Saints. I just dropped an episode with CJ from he has the Fire, Blood, and Blown IG account, which is like a sort of like a syncretic Buddhist folk sorcery. That's his style, but he is a Buddhist, so we had like a total Spurg autistic Vajrayana discussion on different Buddhist deities and protectors in just like a very mythological way. And obviously the Grey Lodge, our next Grey Lodge space is February 13th, Friday night Gnostic Mass. It is will is the cause of fire. So we're going to do an exposition on the Aeon of the Sun and Gnostic Set. Not Gnostic Set, Gnostic Seth. Excuse me. Sorry about that. I always, because people often conflate them, but they're actually distinct figures. So if you want to check me out on Substack. So it's thresholdsaints.substack.com, on IG and Twitter at Threshold Saints, as well as my personal account at Wukong Reborn, WUKONG Reborn. Thank you guys. Appreciate it so much.
Awesome. Have you always had a Substack?
No, it's like a new thing for me because people were like, you need a landing page, and all the millennial podcasters use Substack. So it kind of made sense for me, like naturally, to do it. Plus I do short form writing. So it does kind of make sense. And I'm glad I did it.
Good for you. Good for you. Oh, that's good stuff. Nice. Very good. And we got a special guest with us today. I've been on her show before, trying to get her on here eventually. Well, she's here now, but yeah. And she actually helped me with this guest too. Again, she came across the guest. She sent it to me and I thought he fit the show. So Serena, we got Serena St. Sinclair with us today. What is going on, Serena? How are you? Please let everybody know where they can find all your amazing work.
Thank you so much for having me on. I am Serena St. Sinclair. I am a Chaos Witch, Occultist, Persephone devotee. I have a podcast called Beneath the Bloom that Nick has actually been on, and Blake's episode is coming out in a few weeks. So please come and subscribe if you want to see our conversation. And I also use Persephone's Mythic Descent as a way to guide people through their own Jungian shadow work. So you can find me on YouTube and Instagram. And if you want to see the more chaotic side of me, you can try to find me on TikTok, but I'm warning you, it might not be a good idea. Thank you so much for having me.
No, that's awesome. No, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. And people, for real, go check out our channel. She's had some good names on. Me and Blake have been there. No, but for real, she's had some guests on that I wish I could get on. So definitely go check out her channel. She came out pretty much hitting the fences already with the guests. I'm really impressive. And she does look at it a little bit more of an academic sense as well. And I very much applaud that. So please go check that stuff out. And then finally, my man, Blake, the gentleman occultist, the guest. Please, sir, let everybody know what your deal is and where they can find all of your stuff.
Well, first off, thank you guys so much for having me on. I've checked out several of your guys' shows, and I've really enjoyed like the program that you guys have. I'm really honored to be here and hanging out with you guys. My name is Blake. I'm the Gentleman Occultist. You can find me on TikTok, Instagram. I do have a YouTube channel, The Gentleman Occultist, but currently I only post like my shorts and stuff. Do have plans for long form content eventually, but we're not there just yet. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you very much. If you didn't mention the YouTube, I was going to mention it. I was going to say I really think you should start adding more to it because I did notice. Yeah, you should have a couple of shorts up there.
Yeah,
you're working on that.
It's the baby on the back burner right now. I need to start growing it.
Yes, YouTube needs more gentlemen occultists out there. So please.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, the first question I ask all these people that come on that for the occult, which seems to be every guest now, what is it that got you into this stuff? Like, how did you find yourself being one day like, I'm going to make this my life?
Yeah. So essentially, I grew up very fundamentalist religious. And so, a strict religious devotion was always something that was, um, part of my childhood. Interestingly enough, though, I had a witch grandmother who, was always kind of there in the fringes, teaching me spooky things. And even though I was raised very religious, I was very fascinated by the things that she was interested in. Specifically, she was into tarot. I remember her, like, giving me tarot readings when I was a kid. She was into Reiki. She was into, energy healing and stuff like that. And she always had a bag of, crystals and stuff. And I was so fascinated, even though for me, I was always told, this is evil, this is spooky, you can't really go near it. You're going to let demons into the house and stuff. And so for me, it was always something that was known, but kind of, scary and fascinating at the same time. And when I started to get out of my religious, indoctrination, I feel like I started to look more into a variety of different interests. And specifically, I did get into Buddhism initially for a long time. It was kind of my gateway out of fundamentalist Abrahamic religion. And so after, learning about, the teachings of Buddha, understanding, causes of suffering and how to eliminate suffering, it eventually transcended into, I joined the Freemasons shortly after that. And as a Mason, I learned a lot more about, kind of the conflict that we have, our aversion to death. And I think death for me is always something that was very terrifying, especially because coming out of my original faith, I, didn't have any concept anymore of like what the afterlife could possibly be, because, you have this thought in your mind and it makes you feel very comfortable for a long period of time until all of the sudden your beliefs kind of go out the window. And with that, all of the confidence you have in concepts of the afterlife or where you're going to go after you die and stuff. And so that was very terrifying, honestly. I went through a really bad, like, dark night of the soul. And the thing about Masonry specifically too is they kind of use the concept of death and rebirth and memento mori as lessons to teach you that you should be a little bit more focused on your life currently, and how are you going to live your life to build a legacy? How are you going to use the time you have? Because it's never as long as you think it is, and you better start working on doing meaningful things. And so from there, it just kind of became, I took some religious anthropology classes in college. I started learning more about other religions. I started learning about ceremonial magic. I have a lot of friends that are not only Masons, but Thelemites as well, who would invite me to Gnostic masses and stuff like that. And so really, it just kind of, gradually progressed. I think I went down the pagan witch route first, and then, started kind of going more into ceremonial stuff. And, here I am. So it's been a very eclectic and interesting journey. I think a lot of it was more just coming at things from a scholarly perspective at first, because I was so kind of curious and afraid and wanting to remove that ignorance in my life. Because, like I said, a lot of this stuff was satanic for a large part of my life. And now that I no longer necessarily believe in, these things being satanic, well, what is it then? What is it that draws people to this kind of stuff? And can I find the same similarities in terms of like the miracles or the power that Abrahamic religion has? Can I find those same things in other practices and beliefs? So I think that was kind of the main call for me is, you think about people that are prophets or people that are healers and stuff like that. Well, where does that power come from? And is there, is it satanic just because it's someone else doing it and not your belief system that's allowing you to do that? You know what I mean? So, okay, well, now that there's no dogma anymore associated, where does that come from? And where does that all where does that all lead?
It's really, I really liked what you said there. A lot of that stuff. I even wondered I didn't have like the same background where I had, I guess the occult or kind of witchcraft in my face young, but kind of interesting how like you were saying about like, I think like for me, I think like the fear of hell or even Satan somehow made me want to look into it. Cause I'm like, fuck, like who is this motherfucker in this place that's going to get me? You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that actually made me interested in it. Like, well, this is, what I got coming for me. I got to know what's up, right?
Yeah.
I think it's looking into it is like kind of what brought me into the occult in that sense. Like, or it made me, I guess, a little bit more interested in looking at that stuff. But
well, and that's kind of how things are, right? The more occult they are. I mean, occult, the definition of occult just means hidden. It comes from the Latin occultus, and so it just means something that is not pushed in your face. It's something beneath the surface. And for a lot of fundamentalist religion, anything that isn't part of that same fundamentalist system is occult. I mean, it's such a broad category. It's such a broad term. And unfortunately, because of it's not only exciting because it's hidden, it's also, it's deemed as other or evil because it's hidden by fundamentalism.
Thank you. I agree. What did you think about the Gnostic Mass?
Very eye-opening, honestly. I was ill-prepared the first time I went. And so
did you know the titties were coming or no?
No idea.
Yeah, see, I didn't know either. That fucked me up. I was like, this wasn't on YouTube.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
I was like, oh, if anything else happens, I swear to God, I was like, oh, anything else happens, I'm out of here.
Yep.
I thought I was like, I was like, oh, fuck, it's eyes wide shut. I was like, wow, I actually ended up in that position.
It was a very eyes wide shut moment. Absolutely.
I was like, whoa, what's going on? Yeah, but
I enjoyed it though. I mean, it was what's interesting is speaking of like ceremony and stuff like that, I went with the specific intention of seeing what the ceremony was, because I knew that it was similar in some instances to some Masonic ceremonies. And sure enough, there is a lot of similarity in some of the ritual with the Gnostic Mass that I think was directly taken from Freemasonry.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I think there's stuff taken even in the initiations in the OTO. There's a lot of similarities to some of the Masonic ones.
Mm-hmm.
So
that in the Catholic. Sorry, go ahead.
That in the Russian Orthodox Catholic Church is very, very influential in Crowley's stuff.
Yeah, a lot of ceremonies there as well.
Yeah. Well, he does mention that he was I guess influenced by the Russian Orthodox. That's what he says with the Gnostic Mass. But I actually thoroughly enjoyed it once I got over that whole scare at first. Judith, did you have a child? Did you have a child for any of the? Did we ever do that together? We had to at some point. No, we never did. All right. I used to all the time. At one point, you might even remember. I was in a lot of the Gnostic Masses. I was actually.
I think we used to miss each other.
Yeah. Yeah, but I know. Yeah, I figured I would have. I guess not. But I do think very important. I think it does show the man crossing the abyss. That's my opinion. So I guess that's the whole point of being a magician.
Yeah.
But so I guess what stuff are you into, like, specifically? Like, I guess kind of like what are you drawn to the most?
Sure. Well, once you kind of start to find a practice that you really enjoy, I think a lot of my occult journey so far has been trying to find where that actual practice is and what that repetitive practice is. I think I've dabbled in a lot of different things, and some of it to some effect, some of it to no effect. And I think that trying to find the ticket that really resonates with me is where I'm at. I've been practicing a lot in terms of like witchcraft. I think witchcraft is one of my favorite types of practices, honestly. Sigil magic, spell work, things like that.
Well, it's fun.
Was that?
I think it's fun regardless. I think that's
Oh yeah.
You get so like arts and craftsy with it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's very arts and craftsy. I'm all about that. And kind of similar-ish to Serena, I work with Hades and specifically chthonic gods because, again, the concept of memento mori, it's not only terrifying, but it can be an enormous motivator for your life and your intentions. And so I kind of use chthonic gods as not only a way to focus that intention, but as a way to kind of really put the memento mori concept at the forefront of my mind at all times. Because again, nothing will motivate you more than realizing just how short mortal life is and how much you need to really work at what you're trying to accomplish. So I instead of, fearing death like I used to, I use it as a motivator. And so, working with chthonic gods, Hades and Anubis and stuff like that kind of help focus that intention.
Thank you. Did any of you have anything you wanted to add or anything you wanted to ask?
Sure. I've got a quick one, well, I actually have two, but I think we'll start with Buddhism because that makes sense. Because I'm a tantric Buddhist, so it makes sense for Ike Baker. I don't know how familiar you are with him, but he also started out in Zen. I'm obviously a tantric Buddhist, and the non-normie kind, very different. Obviously, there is overlap, but it's pretty different. But I do think it's interesting because a lot of occultists either start out in Buddhism to sort of like reset the clock, if you want to say it like that, or they end up in Buddhism. So I've interviewed Gregory Peters, who studied with Namkhai Norbu and Dzogchen, and then he had like tantric experiences in Nepal with like goddesses. And so he's like a very eclectic Typhonian, but he would consider himself like kind of a Dharma bro, as the kids would say on Twitter. And so I just wanted to know, like, can you get into some of your experiences, Blake, and why that was like important and useful for you to sort of, I know you touched on it, but just as like a conceptual way of thinking, or kind of like a beginning of the Marga, maybe you could say.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So for me, again, when I came out of fundamentalist religion, I think that it was a very traumatic experience for me. And I was very much searching for a way to relieve my own suffering. And I had started learning about Buddhism. Specifically, I think Alan Watts was a huge kind of catalyst for me getting over a lot of my trauma. I really dove into Alan Watts' lectures. I read a bunch of his books. And then I was listening to podcasts about Buddhism as well. I had a good friend of mine. He's not only a Buddhist, but he's a priest at a local Buddhist temple. I went to a couple of his sermons and ceremonies there. He's a Pure Land Buddhist. And I think for me, learning the kind of life lessons that the actual Buddha learned, he was a prince, and, he was a lot of the suffering that is attributed to human life was hidden from him. He didn't understand certain concepts of like aging and illness and death. These were all hidden from him throughout his youth. And it wasn't until he was an adult where he discovered suffering by seeing sick people and seeing old people and seeing dead people. And it was another thing that like rattled him. And this is just, in the legend of the Buddha. He left his princely life in order to go out and seek a cure for suffering. And so I think I found a lot of my own kind of journey in the journey of the Buddha, because, it was a shock to his system. Oh my God, nothing is as I thought it was. I need to go figure out how I'm going to get over and heal this. And so I saw a similar journey through the Buddha to kind of chart my course toward healing. And so, not only listening to lectures, but, getting into meditation. I think meditation helped a lot. My mind at the time was absolute chaos, and learning meditation and trying to build a meditation practice, especially with other meditators as well. I found some online meditation groups, and we would do like Zoom meditations together. And so trying to just find a way to bring my mind back into a peaceful state was a big catalyst for healing my suffering and trying to follow the Buddha's example. And like you said about a lot of occultists kind of either start or end in Buddhism. I definitely think Buddhism is kind of a gateway, because it's the type of practice that is a religion, but it's also not exclusive, because you can be a Christian and be a Buddhist. You can be a Hindu and be a Buddhist. It's kind of one of those shared religions where anyone can kind of get into it without having to be like a devotee of a separate deity or something. And so it's very welcoming for people who want to kind of branch out of their religion and learn more about other Eastern practices that can eventually lead you down an occult path. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I also think it's interesting you talk about meditation, because this is something that like Nick hammers home a lot on the show. I also do on my show and on the show. And I think Judith is also like very into this mindfulness idea. So I think we're all in concert when I say like meditation number one, and every occultist that we've had on, from David Rankin on, has said meditation is their main practice. It might not be their only practice, as you were saying. Like Dharma is very flexible in a way. Like, yeah, it would be great if people embrace Dharma fully, but like, yeah, you're right. It is, people can be Dharma curious, Dharma cure, and try out different sort of aspects of meditation, and also Dharma as a religion, and they can see if like that flavor is right for them. So thank you so much for saying that.
Yeah.
I also sorry about that. Oh, I just wanted to ask you if you had ever mapped Hades to the Kabbalistic tree, and where you would put him if you did. And if you don't, that's okay. I'm just a Kabbalah nerd, and I like that sort of thing. But, it's all fair. So thank you so much.
You're probably going to hate me, because honestly, the Kabbalah is one of my most recent interests in terms of learning about the Kabbalah. And unfortunately, it's such a major backbone for so many other different types of practices and beliefs that I feel unprepared. Honestly, we just had a couple of lessons from people that are experts in Kabbalah, and so I've been fortunate enough to have people in my life who are Kabbalistic, scholars and experts. And so I'm trying to learn as much as I can from them, because I do see so many similarities and how much Kabbalah influences other practices, that I feel like that is one of my biggest shortcomings as an occultist, is not having enough of a fundamental concept of the Sephiroth and the tree of life and stuff like that. I've had it explained a number of times. I understand kind of like the history of Kabbalah, but unfortunately I haven't done a lot of work in it, and that is one of the big kind of focuses right now, is trying to learn more about it, because I would love to be able to have a good, genuine answer for you in that respect. And I know a lot of occultists should probably have a better foundational understanding of Kabbalah than I have.
I think that's a really fair and honest answer. And I actually don't find that, like, there's no deficiency in that at all. It's just like, you're just saying exactly where you're at with it, and it's totally fine. And I'll even offer you something, just as this is my speculative opinion.
Please.
I personally think I don't know how you feel about like the astrological linkages or the outer three, and this is something that we often debate about on the show. But I definitely think there's like a Plutonic, obviously, and Dath, so that thus Dathic connection, if you associate Pluto with death. So I'll just offer you that. You don't have to agree. That's totally okay. I'm sure there are people out there that are mad at me for saying that, but that's kind of what I think just initially.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. I mean, I'm trying to learn as much as I possibly can in Kabbalah, and making those correspondences and stuff like that. The more knowledge I can have, the better. So I'll absorb it.
Yeah, I think once you get into that stuff, that's going to be a whole rabbit hole. It's going to open up a lot for you. You might even start seeing more stuff. Be like, wow, the occult symbolism in front of my face is insane.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, but I mean, even for myself, I practiced magic for a while, probably about a year before I joined the OTO, and was in the OTO for probably like 6 or 8 months before I even forced myself to start looking at the Kabbalah. So, I mean, it wasn't the first thing I got into either. I kind of really didn't want to, but at one point I was like, I think this is going to be a problem, actually, trying to understand more of this order if I don't get into Kabbalah. I mean, it's like, what's the point of me even looking at 777? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's so Kabbalistic. So, yeah. So it was just, I finally just gave in, and then I was like, wow, I've been missing out. I was like, this shit is fucking great. I was like, oh, I can even understand tarot better by looking at it on the tree. So
yeah, that's the thing. It's got its fingers in so many different occult practices and traditions, and you're almost kind of hindered by not having as much of a understanding. And so I think that's why I'm trying to focus more on it right now, because I want to be able to strengthen other understandings. And so they kind of go hand in hand, honestly.
I found it was interesting. You both said it. The whole thing about Buddhism being like easy. There was a lot of people I knew. I don't know if Judith. I don't know if you remember Tall Mike. He was a Buddhist, and I think that was kind of like how he was able to like kind of get involved into the OTO. And then when he left the OTO, he just went back to Buddhism. And I think it's funny how if you look at Anton LaVey's daughter. Her husband, they went over to the Temple of Set. When they left, they converted to Buddhists.
Zena LaVey and her. You're right. No, they did. She did like a 5-year retreat, actually, a Karma Kagyupa, like full-on retreat. Yeah, they're big. Like they're like well-respected. She's well-respected.
Yeah, they are actually. Yes.
Yeah. And Nicholas Schreck is in it too. Like I don't know how much he's in it. Like she's really in it. Yeah. I don't know how much he's in. I've never spoken to him, but like he seems in it if you follow his Instagram. So
yeah, I thought about actually trying to get them on, but I was like, oh, it might be too.
They're incredibly interesting.
I just don't know what the type of shit I'll deal with. Oh my God, you must be a Satanist now, some shit. I don't know.
That would be very interesting.
Yeah. Just because, unfortunately, this show does teeter like halfway into the conspiracy world. Like I am friends with some of those people, so I'm already pushing it, talking about the occult. If it's not all dicks and demons, there's a problem with that. So, having them on, I'm sure I'd be like, I'd end up on the William Ramsey show a couple of months from now. Jin's like, I can't believe you just said that.
No, it's fine. I understand. I totally get it. We ride the polarities right on the show. That's what it's all about, right? So everybody gets it. If you're an occult podcaster, there's like it's unfortunate, but there's like a limit to how much you can actually discuss in public. And I don't just mean like secret knowledge or anything like that. I just mean you have to. There's just a level of discernment needed to like discuss things, because people can take it in any way. And you don't necessarily want them to take it in that way, but you might also want to discuss, like for my episode with CJ, we discussed like mythological things, like Tibetans used to believe that they were demon worshippers. That's how Tibetans would describe themselves. So we have to discuss those things, but that doesn't mean that I'm saying for people to go worship demons. So I'm just using that as an example, but it's so hard. It's like it's a fine line. So I totally get it. Sorry about that.
Well, and demon in other cultures is different from demon in Christian cultures. We use similar language, but they all mean different things. And in some instances, demon means evil, and in some instances, demon just means another type of spirit. So,
or they even daemon, completely different at that point.
Yeah.
That was like Plotinus had his daemon appear to somebody so they could see if he was a good person or a bad person. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. So it's like that's yeah. So who knows? Yeah. Sorry about that rant. Well, I was gonna ask you something. Did Serena or Judith? Did any of you, before I keep going forward, just not putting you on the spot? Did any of you have any questions or anything you want to say?
Well, I did have something I kind of wanted to mention. So I know that you said that you grew up fundamentalist, and that like anything that was outside of your Christian upbringing was satanic. And I'm curious what your opinion is if it wasn't so polarized, if you weren't raised so polarized, like this is what is good and everything else is satanic. But I'm just like been kind of sitting with the concept of if in some of the Christian upbringing, if they allowed more multiple truths, then would people be able to stay Christian longer, I guess, or be able to take in more information? Because equating like Buddhism to being satanic or being inherently bad, I think that if I does that make sense? I don't know exactly what I'm asking, but I just feel like it sounds like you were raised super, super polarized. And maybe if it wasn't so polarized, do you think that you might have been able to stay Christian or take in more information? But is the fact that it was so structured what kind of cracked your you deconstructing from Christianity?
Wow. So I think it's kind of twofold. The methods of indoctrination in fundamentalist religion are not for the benefit of the person who it's affecting. So it's not for my benefit. I'm not benefiting from the indoctrination. The structure is benefiting from my indoctrination. So the reason fundamentalism exists is because it needs to circumvent any other type of thought process that you have, which allows you to think anything is other than what the structure wants you to believe it is. And whether or not that is intentional or whether or not that is just as a byproduct of the structure existing itself, I don't really know. I think a lot of it is intentional. I think a lot of it is a structure built around complete obedience. And so the way that things are kind of labeled as this is good because this is what we believe and this is evil because this is outside of what we believe, that doesn't benefit anyone. And I think honestly, if you're a person, it depends on how long you're going to survive in that fundamentalist mindset. If you're a person who has a mind that eventually leads you to asking too many questions and coming out of it, I think you're going to have a visceral negative reaction to it when you come out, which is what happened to me. I had a visceral negative reaction to Abrahamic religion because of coming out of the fundamentalist aspect of it. I abhorred it. I didn't want to be a part of it whatsoever. And so I think in that instance, the fundamentalist aspect, as long as you're in it, you feel great. But the second you're out of it, it feels like a stab in the back. And you don't want to feel that stab in the back. And so if it was a little bit more open to other concepts, I think people would probably stay Christian longer because it's not like you have this hoodwink that is being revealed all of the sudden. It's kind of like, hey, yeah, you can be a Christian and learn about these other things. Especially too, when I started learning about the concept of Christian ceremonial magic, I was, like they've been practicing this since, before the 1500s, yet all of the sudden it's satanic to, do spells in the name of Jesus Christ. It's satanic to, have these, to do ceremonial magic in a Christian sense. Like whose decision is it now that that's evil? And so I think if it was a little bit more open to allowing people to kind of experiment more, it wouldn't necessarily push people away from fundamentalist religion. I think it would be more inclusive. I think people would be more comfortable with experimenting, and it, as long as it's something that you're genuinely interested in. If the only reason you're interested in it is because you've been told your whole life that this is the only thing you're allowed to be interested in, then you're going to realize that if that's not true, then what else am I being lied to about? So the whole thing ends up becoming a big lie, I guess. I would rather have learned about, and the thing that is so wild about studying more about the occult in general is so much of it is also influenced by Abrahamic religion. And if you go into, like, if you're a person who is interested in Abrahamic religions and you get into, Solomonic magic and stuff like that, that's very influenced by Abrahamic faith. If you think about even, Kabbalah and stuff like that, that's Jewish mysticism that has been, kind of converted over time. And so if you were allowed to study those things, I think it would make it much more impactful of a practice, instead of saying, oh, no. The second you say magic, the second you grab a crystal, now it's satanic, and I think that's where, learning more about Buddhism and stuff. When I was practicing Buddhism, I was like, what is evil about this? Like, I genuinely can't figure out what about this is evil. Why am I always being told that stuff like this is? And so it becomes, you start to see the man behind the curtain. And I think it would be better if organized religions allowed for people to kind of experiment more, because the second you come out of it, you have this negative reaction and it just steers you in an entirely different direction.
It's really interesting that you're just saying, well, for one, I think that was great. Great answer. Thank you very much. And I could totally see how, like, even for myself, and I've even said this about where I'm at. North Carolina is supposed to be one of the biggest, it is the biggest state for, I think, witchcraft or the witchy community. And I do think it's also because of how extreme religious they can also be. So I think it's like kind of like a snapback, or like a pushback to it. But the thing when you're talking about Hebrew, the Abrahamic religions, they're also the most prevalent when it comes to occult symbolism, and probably influencers in the occult world. Like, even for myself, from being in the OTO or ceremonial magic order, most of the oldest symbolism that I would see on anything would be from a combination of all those, probably. Even in some of them, not that I'm going to get into it, and Judith, I'm not asking you to say anything, but even looking at the initiations and certain things done in there, knowing the setting and some of the symbolism in there, you will actually see Hebrew, Christian, or Catholic, and Islam, actually, in a sense. So I do find that interesting. Even, the Masons, even to use them as an example, about the Shriners, they use Islamic symbolism.
Yep.
You will see, I think, the three Abrahamic religions are like kind of the top dogs when it comes to like occult symbolism, I think, in a sense, or like their views of it in orders. I mean, even when you start getting at it, like if you want to start looking at alchemists, I mean, that basically came out of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the earliest alchemists that you go back and look at, most of them were all Islamic. And you were even talking about, I think, like the Buddhism having like some story of a prince. They got one, Prince Yalid or whatever. Same story. He was a prince and gave it up and became like this, master alchemist. So I mean, even they even got the same kind of like crossover stories and shit. Mm-hmm. I even think the father of chemistry was a Islamic alchemist. I forgot his name. I covered him. So it's just it is interesting how you will, in my opinion, even the Catholic Church, occult as fuck. So all three of them, it's very prevalently occult, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
But, it was a great question. I just want to say that, Serena. That was a really good question, because I think, like, for me, like, I take it more like, I think Blake did a great answer for that, but I just feel like I take it as dualism is the poison. It's not the religion or the name. Like, I don't really care what other people believe, because I can't really control it personally, right? Like, my own, like, this very Kabbalistic, like, it's my own sphere of influence. My own Malkuth is only myself. So, how much can I extend beyond that? I can't control what anyone thinks. But I also think, like, that's a fundamental question. Like, if Christianity or any of the major faiths were more flexible, I guess is maybe a good word, to other kinds of paths, or other kinds of, maybe they just need to be more esoteric. I think that's the case that like we've made on this show a lot, is like it's all there, but it's so decoherent. It's not really it's not codified properly, or it's codified for people that are in the quote unquote inner or secret temple, and so it's very inaccessible to like the mass congregation. And this is like for all religions, and this is actually for a lot of secret societies as well. And I'm not criticizing them. Like, I'm cool with a lot of people from Temple of Set and Golden Dawn and all of like I've spoken to all of those people, but I just think like a lot of this systematization is actually lost. I'm not saying it's completely lost, but I'm saying that I think that people are actually putting it back together. I think that's what podcasting in the occult space is a lot of what actually people are doing, is they're trying to piece things back together, be in dialogue with people, be relational with people, even if you don't agree. And that's actually can be really generative and positive to disagree on things, because you can sort of decide what you want to believe. I don't know. Sorry, I didn't mean to go on a rant, but I just want to say that was a great question. And it's also something that I often think about as like a quote unquote sorcerer or whatever I am. So.
Well, it is, because I do think that it is the reason for people to go the other direction. Yeah.
Well, if I can respond, I think I agree with you about the dualism part specifically too, because I think that dualism is an important building block. Like if we look at, like Taoism, yin and yang, like it's an important building block, but I don't think it's a strong enough structure to really build a lot of things off of. And I think that it can be helpful, but when we only look through things through a dualistic lens and not be able to hold multiple truths, I think that things will crack, because it's not that simple, and our existence isn't that simple. Life isn't that simple. And when we try to oversimplify it, well, I think that that's kind of why so many people are leaving organized religion. And I do think that like structure is needed. And as someone who grew up in organized religion, I miss the community of it. I miss some of the some of the aspects of it. And I do see that there's like a lot of eclectic practices these days. And I kind of miss the community aspect from a lot of this stuff, and a little bit of the structure, like being able to go somewhere where I can go and worship. Like I don't really have that. And so I'm trying to like think of like, oh, how can we take all the best parts of organized religion and then all the beautiful parts of like finding your own eclectic practice and trying to marry them. And I feel like one of the truths that I've recently come up to is like dualism is kind of ruining organized religion. And I wish it was a little bit more flexible, I guess.
That was another great answer. And I'm very Buddhist actually, because we believe that most things are relatively true, and there's only one primordial truth. So I just think, wow, that's kind of that's a very interesting framing, Serena. I co-sign whatever you want to call it.
Nice. Did anybody else have anything before I continue?
Based on what Serena said in regard to, how do you marry these ideas? I think that's, structure is great. And in terms of, someone who is a fan of ritual, I can get very OCD when it comes to ritual. And so I'm not saying that, we shouldn't have structure and things like that. I think it's when those things are excluded from other practices. And there's a lot of syncretism in occultism. There's a lot of syncretism in paganism, and that's fine. Syncretism has always existed in paganism and in occultism and stuff like that. And it shouldn't just be like throw everything in with the kitchen sink and just it's all going to work. But yeah, I think, the great thing that I remember about going to church was that feeling you get of community, that feeling you get of when you genuinely feel like you're worshiping. It gives you like a high, it gives you this euphoric experience. And that's what organized religion is supposed to elicit. You get this, I'm struggling to remember what the actual term is, but it's the same experience you get if you go to music festivals and stuff like that. There's this collective high you get when you're doing something joyous together with other people. And so, I definitely wouldn't say I found that in occultism necessarily. I think a lot of occult practice, for the most part, is gonna be very solitary unless you join a really strong mystery cult or something like that that allows you to practice together. But it's, you know, probably still not going to be like jumping in the air and singing and stuff like that. So
when you did mention ritual, stuff like that, that was something I was going to ask you a little bit about. When it comes to those type of practices, what is it that like I don't know, like, are you into the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, the hexagram? Like, I don't know, like, when you say that, what is a ritual? Like, what kind of ritual experience do you have?
Yeah, LBRP, headless, hornless, you know, stuff
Okay.
like that.
All right. All right.
I think ritual for me, especially coming from a Masonic background, I really enjoy structured ritual, and I enjoy the concept of being able to learn something that you can continue to perfect. Because you know, just, you know, and it's kind of a contradiction when it comes to like spell work, where spell work can end up being very much intuition. And even though there are specific spells that you do, I would separate spell work from ritual work. And, you know, because there's definitely a separate component to it. And I think at the beginning too, I was averse to some certain ceremonial magic because, again, that snapback effect of having an aversion to Abrahamic religion. When you're doing something like the LBRP, you're invoking a lot of biblical angels. You know what I mean? And if you're a person who's, you know, against Abrahamic religion, and then all of a sudden you're doing a ceremony that has to do with ties to the Abrahamic faith, it almost feels like, you know, you feel like you're kind of getting your own self pushback from it because you don't want it to be associated with that anymore. So, you know, trying to find other rituals as well that are not based on, you know, holy guardian angels and stuff like that, or, you know, Abrahamic influences, whether it's, you know, demons or angels or deities and stuff like that. Definitely still looking for more of those.
Nice. Judith, Judith or Jen? Serena?
I did have an inquiry, but it's more on your mystery school and how you came about to develop it. Because you said you didn't have much, you're learning about the Kabbalah now.
Yes.
So, and you have a Wiccan, I believe, or a more pagan background and Buddhist. So I'm curious on how you came up about developing it without the Kabbalah being part of it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. And the great thing about the program so far is that I am one of those people who I will never claim to be the smartest person in the room. The benefit that I have is being able to find people that are also very smart and being able to cultivate knowledge from other people. And so luckily, you know, I have a lot of connections. I have a lot of friends in my pocket that are like PhDs and stuff like that. And so when I started developing this idea of building kind of like a modern day mystery school, I reached out to a number of those people because they are also people that I would consider interested in the occult or are experimenters themselves, practitioners themselves. And so for me, it was kind of a how do we build something that allows people to come together to kind of shed dogma, to shed fear and shame, and learn together as a collective where it's very open-ended, but we can have people a part of it who are able to kind of pick up different corners at the same time. You know, I know where my corner is and I know what side of this school that I can hold up, but how do I find someone else who is a Kabbalist who can hold up that corner of the school? And, you know, are there other witches out there who want to help hold up other corners? And so for me, the mystery school, it started as a very nascent idea, but it rapidly started growing. And right now we have just under like 800 people that are involved, which is really exciting because the discussion, when you get that many people involved, is very diverse. And so I think having that diverseness of clientele is great because, again, we have Kabbalists, we have Satanists, we have, witches, we have pagans, we have Kabbalists, we have ceremonial magicians, tarot readers, astrologers, and so the good thing about having a mystery school like that is I don't have to be the know all be all. I can bring people together and let them flex their strengths. And that allows them, people who are probably really well skilled, but probably haven't ever taught anything. Well, now is your time. You don't really know what you know well unless you're able to teach it to someone else. And so I think that it gives people who may be averse initially to kind of pushing themselves in that direction, a place to do it where they are safe and where other people can kind of learn and we can all work together as we go. So that's exactly the reason why I brought my good friend on, who is a Kabbalist, because I was like, you know what, we need to have something in here to really, make this a bedrock foundation. And they are working on their own course as well. They're going to be developing their own courses, which will be available in due time. So we're getting there. It's a slow but exciting process.
What kind of stuff? What would be some of the things you do have on this site? Well, what made you even give us the whole, if you don't mind, maybe even give us the whole, what did you come up with this idea? What is it that you're looking to do? All this and that.
Oh man. So I had a very interesting conversation. I've been a closet practitioner for a large part of my post-religious life. Primarily because, again, I was raised fundamentally, and so all of my family are fundamentalists. And so I've had to hide a lot of things from them. And so, whenever people come visit, time to cover up the altar, time to cover up all my supplies, get rid of these symbols, take those off the wall. And so it was something that I constantly felt like I wasn't living my authentic self. I was always in the broom closet, so to speak. And so I had a very interesting conversation with my religious grandma, not my witch grandma. My witch grandma passed away, unfortunately, a while back. But my fundamentalist grandmother gave me a call and told me that she was very upset because the rapture was coming soon. And she was sad that I wasn't going to be going with her. She was, her and all the rest of my family were going to leave and I was going to be left behind. And so it was kind of in that moment where I kind of realized, what am I even hiding myself from? My family already thinks I'm going to go to hell. Why am I trying to pretend like I'm still this, good Christian boy? And it kind of shook me in this way where I was like, you know what, if they already think I'm going to go to hell, why don't I just full send, be my true authentic self and do something about it? And so I've always wanted to build a community of occultists. I think that the occult is something that really started this new chapter in my life. And I wanted to be able to share that with other people, especially people who were going through the same fundamentalist deconstruction that I was going through. I think that the process of learning the occult was very pivotal in my healing journey. And I think that it can be a way that not only heals other people of their fundamentalism, I think occultism honestly is something that can save society. I think that our culture in general is very much leaning towards this structured, Christo dominant society. And it's leading us down a path that I think is very negative. I think the concept of belief in the rapture is very damaging, not only to your psyche, but also to society, because if you think that the planet is a temporary existence that we can just use and destroy, and then we're all gonna be shipped off to heaven, and the rest of us are gonna burn in hell. The concept is so damaging, because long-term thinking goes away, stewardship of the planet goes away, and we should be people who look after our society, our planet. We should be thinking long term, and occultism and other religions allow for more long term thinking. And unfortunately, there's too many people in positions of power that don't have that same long term thinking. I'm going on a very long-winded, conversation right here, but all that to say, occultism is going to help society heal and grow. And how are we going to do that if we don't start building things that allow people to learn it in a safe way, where they can remove dogma, where they can remove shame and fear, and be more geared towards welcoming other people and learning more. Paganism especially too. Paganism is all about respect for nature. It's about respect for sanctity of life. And I think if anyone started studying more about paganism and looked at our connection with the earth and stuff like that, we wouldn't see life and the planet as just this temporary frivolous material that we can abuse while we fuck off to heaven. And I apologize, I don't know if cussing is loud here. If that we can just screw and we go off to heaven and everything else gets left behind. We should be cultivating a society that allows for us to flourish in the future. And I don't think that the modern religious mindset is leading us in that direction. So how do we combat that with occult study, with occult structure to kind of counterbalance that? I guess is where I started coming up with the idea of the mystery school, getting back to the actual question that was asked.
Nice. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I know me and you were talking earlier, just chit-chatting a little bit. And I've said it on the show multiple times here and there, and I think you kind of have a same feeling. Do you think we're going to maybe possibly have? I think we have a chance, a really good chance of almost having some other kind of type of occult renaissance, coming. And you said you kind of feel the same way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You think it's starting to become something that's being a little bit more accepted, or to be able to be looked at now than it was per se even 20, 30 years ago?
I genuinely do. And there's a lot of people online who are talking about what the new Renaissance looks like. If you look back at history, I'm a big believer in life being this kind of cyclical pattern, right? Everything is cyclical. There's times and seasons, and they change. And even though we live in the 21st century, we still reflect the same structure that happened in the 15th century. So if you look at things in a cycle, what was happening prior to what we would consider the Renaissance, right? What was happening prior to that? There was political upheaval, there was religious upheaval, there was deconstruction happening. People were learning more. People were finding ancient occult books and translating them into their modern language at the time.
Yeah, that was a huge thing.
Yeah. Scholarship in that time, discovering Hermetic texts. There were thousands of Hermetic texts that were found and translated into the modern language. And so it was a flourishing of ideas being based off of a refinding of ancient knowledge that was lost during the Dark Ages. So you have all of this knowledge that happened, around, let's say the turn of the millennia. And then you have, all of this knowledge that was developed and written about, thousands of Hermetic texts and stuff like that. Then you go through this fundamentalist period of time where you have the Dark Ages, you have the Inquisitions and stuff like that. And then, once what was the actual term I'm looking for? When secular there was a secular revival that decided to kind of push away religion for a little bit to learn more about the self. And we started developing, tools, and we started developing science. And so if you look at that pattern of, you have this Renaissance, a Dark Age, a Renaissance, a Dark Age. We are at the tail end of what I think the next Dark Age has been. And even though I say Dark Age, yeah, we had an explosion of technology. We've had an explosion of the internet and stuff like that. That's all great. But what have we been doing with it, and where are we going now? I think we are on the cusp of what I think could be a very impactful renaissance for everything, not even just occultism, a renaissance of human secular philosophy that, kind of builds toward this hopefully utopia. I'm a huge believer in the concept of utopia. If we're all able to come together and create a society that is, perfect and amazing. And obviously, for most it's a pipe dream, and honestly, it probably is a pipe dream, but I think that we can always focus on how do we get to that utopia? We can't ever get there unless we're putting stones now to eventually lead to some utopia. So I think we're at the cusp of a renaissance. I think occultism is going to start blossoming. I think that paganism, especially, there are large pagan communities that are only growing in size. And, I've heard the opposite as well. Catholicism and Abrahamic religion is getting very popular in other parts of the country. So I think there's kind of like a shifting based on geographical location. We're here. And I think it takes people who have the same kind of pioneering mindset as, what makes organized religion so powerful and so prevalent. It's people with big microphones, it's people with big buildings. And, if you think about like what it takes to be a religious scholar, it takes years of schooling. If you go through, if you want to be a clergyman, you have to go to seminary school. You know what I mean? There's so much structure around being a religious devotee in the Abrahamic, whether it's Catholic or Christian or Jewish, there's a lot of training and structure. Occultism doesn't really have anything like that. And I think we need to start developing our own, kind of occult schools that allow for us to practice the same way, and not to create like priesthoods necessarily. I don't think creating like a priesthood is the best way, because there are plenty of, pagan priesthoods that you can go through. But, developing occultism as a school of philosophy or history is the way we're going to start edging our way into this heavily organized religion kind of, bulwark that has been existing for 2,000 years at this point. We got to push back in some way. And I think finding what that angle is to push in is where we're at right now.
I have a question about that. So within your vision, you don't see any coexistence?
Oh, I think coexistence is absolutely possible. I think the thing is there isn't coexistence now. I think that's the biggest thing. We don't live in a society where that coexistence is allowed. We live in a very dualistic society, and being able to bring the occult up, again, it's about balance, right? And it kind of, reflects back to Serena's question earlier about, well, if people were allowed to study other things, would they have a different kind of all around thought structure about it? And I think, yes, people can still consider themselves Christian. I have nothing necessarily against the Christian religion. Personally, I think that there's just too much in terms of the dogma associated with it. That is the problem. It's not necessarily the lessons. It's not necessarily the teachings. I think it's more just the structure around it and how it leads people. Apocalyptic religions in general are a problem, right? And I would absolutely categorize Christianity as an apocalyptic religion because of the concept of the rapture and the tribulation and stuff like that. They don't think that anything good is going to come from this planet. They want to see an end to it. They want to see the destruction so that they can go to heaven. And that is like the main core concept, right?
So let me push back against you a little bit, Blake. I think this is a good place. Is that is very much a fundamentalist interpretation. Like, I grew up in a very syncretic household. My dad is Indonesian Chinese, talked about this many times on the show. My mom's French Canadian. I grew up in a very mixed religious household. My dad practices a religion called Kabatinan, which most people don't even know what that is. So the reality is like, your experience, and also I want to say this, utopianism is also millenarian. You might not understand it to be like that, but in a Buddhist view, both of those things are extremism, we would say. They're both, it's too far. You're supposed to build your own Malkuth first. So I would just say, like, to follow up what Judith is saying, is like, I do agree that the aeon is shifting and we are moving into a new yuga. And Tantra also agrees with that. It's not just like me coming up with that. Absolutely. We are leaving Kali Yuga, or we have.
Yeah.
And I believe we are going into the Aeon of the Daughter, as I've called it, or the Aeon of Maat, as Talima calls it, which I have no problem with either one. And I just think that, but I think it's a psychic Aeon. I think it's actually a post-magical Aeon. I know this is a little radical, but I do think it's much more about the self, not the self as in psychological or scientific, because you have to admit that there is something very superficial. And in Kabbalah, we would even say, like, all institutional sort of formations are both of Bina and Tiferet. So they have like this kind of physical edifice and sort of a physical manifestation in people's imaginal or imaginary. Both of those things are very dualistic, as you were saying. So it's not about like recreating the institutions of the past. It's about like looking forward to see like what institutions we can then create that aren't going to replicate exactly the same structures as before. But it's not about necessarily dismantling. It's not about being a material like anarchist where you're going to like go like set things on fire, right? You just are going with it and you're kind of reconstituting yourself, rectifying yourself, and then moving up the tree, if you want to call it that. That's how I would think of it. So I would just say, like, back to you, is that I don't think that most people might have the opinion that their experiences in whatever religion it is, because it doesn't just have to be Christianity. There are very dogmatic Buddhists. There are very, like, it depends. Sure. It depends on like your, cultural religion, like religion that is embedded in culture tends to be very dogmatic regardless of what it is.
Yeah.
Dualism is very much about the individual mind and their perception of like the outer reality. So in my opinion, I just think we can control ourselves. And so I just prefer not to like say, oh, it's going to be utopian or millenarian. And I reject that. And I also said that, have said that to Ike and other people. Like, I don't agree with that Gurdjieff or the Edward Casey opinion. And I know that that is kind of a very important sort of cornerstone of many of the people who belong to the Golden Dawn and Temple of Set. I just don't personally believe in an apocalyptic ending either. So I don't think it's totally fair to say that it is just a Christian phenomenon. And I also think that fundamentalism, as in reading text as literal, I have met many, many occultists and many, many pagans who also read texts as very literal. So I don't think that that is a Christian phenomenon. I think that that is just an individual phenomena of the mind again. So that's all I want to say. It's just a little bit of it's not really contention. It's just, I think it's a good polarity maybe.
No, I appreciate you speaking up, and I don't mean this specifically as there's only one enemy to this concept. You know, I 100% agree with you. There's dogmatic occultists. You know what I mean? Every type of faith and practice will have fundamentalism and dogma in it, and I think the problem is that I don't necessarily think a pagan who has the ability to write and pass laws is going to do the same amount of damage as a fundamentalist Christian who is able to write and pass laws. So I guess that's maybe where I'm coming at, because unless you are a devout Christian and you have these boxes ticked in order to run for office and stuff like that, it's very hard for someone who is not fitting in that same exact structure to have positions of authority where it affects the world in a global capacity. So I guess that's more what I mean in terms of that. But no, I don't disagree at all. I think fundamentalism is everywhere, and the concept of utopia, and I don't know if I'm using that term incorrectly, but is more about just the alleviation of fundamentalism in a way where coexistence is a lot more prevalent than us versus them. So I agree with you though, absolutely.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, and for allowing me the space to sort of say that in return. I would just say to your last point about, like, I don't personally feel that anyone is really I don't think we live in a world where, I think we live in a very free world, and we are we are very agential if we choose to be. So I don't personally feel like I walk outside and I'm like, oh, I live in a quote unquote Christian nation and feel oppressed by that. But that's just maybe me. I don't feel that. And I know a lot of people who, have institutional power that are non-normative in their lifestyle, presentation, or religious peculiarities, whatever those may be. So I really don't see it as like pagan is in any way in 2026. Like, I don't see them as like an oppressed minority, just personally, just from my perspective.
One thing I did want to, did anybody have any? Sorry, Judith.
I was going to ask a question because you framed it as if we have an upcoming Renaissance, and during the last Renaissance, it was we received artworks and all those beautiful. So what productive, beautiful thing do you see coming from this vision of Renaissance that you believe is coming?
Oh goodness.
My thumbnail.
Absolutely. I mean, I think people are tired, and this is I don't have any like studies. I don't have any citing sources for this information that I have. It's more just like anecdotal. People are tired of like fakeness, I guess. I think AI has become such a thing where people are so excited about it, but it's really easy to see through AI, and a lot of people are like, more AI slop and blah 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 blah. And I think authenticity is something that it gets to a breaking point where we're tired of kind of like the status quo. Certain things can kind of feel like a cultural prison, and especially with the advancement of technology, right? And again, anecdotal, but I feel like people would rather read an actual book than hold a Kindle in their hand. I think that there are things about technology where it gets to a point where we kind of want to go back to a more authentic expression of what art looks like, whether it's painting, whether it's writing poetry and stuff like that. I feel like when I started experimenting with occultism, I was more inspired to be interested in things like poetry and art, because being able to learn more about these symbols and being able to look at ancient, Renaissance pictures and trying to pull apart occult symbolism in those, there's an amazing artwork called Melancholia that has so much interesting occult symbolism in it and stuff. And you could just look at it and stare at it and pull things apart all day. But, it's an authentic expression. It's something that someone actually made. And so I hope, if we are to have this beautiful occult renaissance, that type of structure would maybe come back, occult music, occult poetry, occult artwork and stuff like that. Books, I think there's a lot of fantasy books which are really fun and stuff, but I don't know, maybe I just haven't read any, but I would love more like occult, modern occult grimoires even, you know what I mean? We have so much ancient text, we have so much ancient stuff. And we do have some like turn of the century stuff as well. Not to say that everything occult is ancient. A lot of it is more modern. But full on grimoires of modern occult practice, that would be kind of what our archaeologists 1,000 years from now gonna look back and say, oh, this is where this era of occultism really made an impact. What is that going to be? I guess I don't really know. I hope that we can make an impact in some way where 1,000 years from now, archaeologists look back and go, that was a good period of occultism.
One thing I did want to say, I think, like even when I say like a Renaissance, and like Judith mentions like the art, yeah, of course, obviously, that came upon that. I often think that is the result of people having magical experiences. That art now comes to be because they're trying to express something that they experienced. Absolutely. So, like, I do think, like, if we start going into, like, I guess, new occult renaissances, people start having their own magical experiences, crossing the abyss, out-of-body experiences, this and that, things that rock their core and changed them and left them with visions and stuff. I think that's when you'll start seeing art, or even maybe music might change. It might actually start getting better. And other things. I do think that will be a side effect of people having that experience. I mean, I would never have even tried to entertain doing a podcast if it wasn't from the experiences I had.
Exactly.
That's what inspired me to start doing it. So I do think that that could be possibly like the side effect of a part of going the Renaissance. Another thing I did want to add, and it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe it might sound a little shitty to get into, but I do think it's kind of reality when you start looking at like just even the ideas of magic and orders themselves. I'd say like most of the stuff that like really is huge nowadays really isn't any older than the 1700s. It might be influenced by things much older like Plato and Neoplatonism and stuff, but a lot of these things that happen to have names, even like, the Golden Dawn, the OTO, the Temple of Set, that's even younger. Even the Masons, really. They've gone through a few generations of like people that have been the mouthpiece for them. And I do think, if like I'm just keeping it real, at least for the OTO as well, but for the most part, if you start looking at the people that represent these ideas of Thelema or the OTO, they ain't got much time left. Just keeping it real. So who's going to be the people that are going to be talking about that stuff after they're gone? Is it people that are around now that weren't being listened to in the past? Well, if there's something to that effect, I'm just, in another 10, 20 years, just, the people that might have been faces or influencing these thoughts or these types of schools of thought really won't be here to keep giving their point of view on it. And the times have changed as well. Even with just technology, we have a total generation of people that look at things differently, are able to read more, look at other things more. That wasn't as easy 200 years ago. You weren't going to go, like, for me, if I want to start doing science and trying to look at it, the occult, you know how hard that would have been for me to do? There was no internet for me to just Google shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, how
in a library.
Yeah, right. And so, and I just, just keeping it real, I do think that's even something that's coming to be soon too, is that the old school and thoughts of what magic was might even be changing a little bit by the people that are involved in it now and are taking, I guess, the torch, if you want to look at it that way, and going forward with it. I do think magic's being looked at a little bit differently than it used to be. I think it's going back more of people, my opinion, I'm seeing a lot more people that look at it a little bit academically or more in a polymath sense, which is the way it was during the Renaissance.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Well, and
I
you're
think
right.
that might,
Technology is the course. Apologies. Go ahead. Yeah. I
know,
agree.
I just,
Technology is the way.
no, I know that's kind of like a shitty way to look at it, but I'm just, keeping it real. I mean, eventually things end and it keeps going in other ways. So yeah, I just think that we're on the verge of maybe being a little bit more open to things that others generations before us might have been a little bit closed-minded on. I think that might help bring the appeal to more people to get into it.
Well, I think that that's one of the cool things about your school is what are you doing with that? But you're kind of building legacy, honestly, right? You're building a platform, or anybody who makes any sort of like temple or mystery school, like you're creating a structure for things to grow outside of you and to continue on. And I think that that's awesome because on one hand, I think that some old ideas need to die. Sorry. Like, some things are wrong. Like, some of the old stuff is, I think that there's like a lot of romanticism in like antiquity, like something old equates good. And I'm like, not necessarily, like, I don't think that that's true. Although we can find a lot, we can learn a lot from the past, but some things, some old ideas need to die. Sorry. But I think that we also, there needs to be, I think I just keep talking about balance, and it's so just the same thing I can keep coming back to is like, we can learn from the past, but we also need to be able to grow and to create new ideas. But one of the cool things about technology and your school and other people who do stuff like what you're doing is you're building a legacy where other people can come in and share their ideas and continue to grow. But I mean, one thing I think, especially specifically with the Renaissance that we're talking about right now, is we have this incredible tool like the internet, like computers, like technology that no one has ever had before. And I was even listening to Nick, the show that you were on earlier. You guys were talking about like the burning down of the Library of Alexandria. And it's like, we, in the past, like we could lose all of our records. Like we had the ability, but right now, I mean, unless like the internet gets destroyed somehow, I don't know, we have the really, really cool thing about this specific movement that has never really happened in the past is we have ways of archiving our thoughts, archiving our beliefs, and then sharing them with each other on like a really easy worldwide scale instantaneously.
That was really great, Serena. I totally agree with you. That's even a great Kabbalistic metaphor you use, like to build something outside of yourself, like very Malkuth to Netzach, like you're planting the seeds in the garden, like the seeds of the pomegranate, maybe you could even say. That's very Kabbalistic, right? Because the pomegranate is the perfect metaphor for Kabbalah. So I appreciate that. I agree. And I think it like is even that what Nick said, like everything's so recent. Like all magic is very recent and it's all actually replicable. I agree with what Nick was saying about like if you're having higher Sephirotic experiences or tantric experiences or you're seeing the colors, there's a lot of people behind the scenes who are not podcasting, who might be maybe even peripherally podcasting, but not like regularly, like on how Nick does, who are really, really looking at like the different systems. Like I study Kabbalah with someone and he is really into the idea of Buddhism and Kabbalah having like a 13th century convergence. Now, I just said like everything is more recent, and I agree. It's all about syncretism at different times. So I don't even really personally believe in it. I'm not contradicting anyone. This is just my weird axial age historical appraisal, but I don't really believe in a dark age. I think you can look at anywhere in the world and there were different things happening at different times. I think different places are on different kinds of time scales or time wheels. It's a very tantric way to think. But yeah, I definitely think that we're in a convergent time. And like Serena's saying, like what we're doing right now, like we're on a podcast I'm with two pagans. I'm with Judith, who looks at mindfulness, Nick, who's ex-OTO, and I'm like, I'm practicing Tantra, Buddhism, and Hebrew, like traditional medieval Hebrew Kabbalah. So like we are actually doing it right now. Like we are doing it in discourse right now. Like we're doing Plato 101 magic arises in discourse. And that's what I think. I mean, I just think that the podcasting is it. Like, I'm not saying it's like it's perfect. There's a lot of people who I don't agree with, but that's okay too, because people have to use discernment too. I think that's a big part. Like, they're talking about Mars in the chat, and you can look at Kabbalistically and sort of understand Mars as the gross astrology of the tree and say, yeah, we are moving into a more Gevuratic era where people will actually need to exercise a lot of personal discernment. And not everything is going to be true. And like Serena said, sure, old things need to die. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with certain institutions completely like fading away. But again, we live in a cycle. So there is no real old ideas and there's no real new ideas. We're just constantly reconstituting it. But I'm excited for not necessarily AI. And I agree with you 100%, Blake. Like, like I do not believe in either the AI apocalypse or the AI utopia. I think it's a tool, a techne, and I think we get to use it. It's the aeon of man. I know I said aeon of the daughter, and it is, but it's also the aeon of man if we choose, right? Because we have to be of our own free will to choose that for ourselves. So we get to, I think we'll be able to use the technology if we want to. And like, yeah, knowledge is free. Dath is free. Dath is definitely liberated by the internet. There's no question about that. It's all available. I can access the most transgressive left-hand path grimoires. I can access all of chaos magic. I can read OTO materials, Golden Dawn, everything. I mean, it's all accessible to me. Hosted, interestingly, on a lot of government websites.
Yeah.
Like the Internet Archive and like CIA.gov. I'm just saying, it's all there. They're the CIA is the biggest host of all the grimoires. I'm just saying. So if you're like a young mage cell like me, well, I'm not that young, but I mean, if you're interested in magic, then that's a place you might go. So yeah, it's about what we're gonna do with it. But so I'm excited. So I just want to say that. Sorry, I didn't mean to go on a rant about that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So give us, like, if you don't mind, maybe a couple examples of like some stuff that you do feature in your academy. We try to entice some of the listeners, you know what I'm saying, to go over and check it out.
Sure, absolutely. A couple of the courses that I've developed so far, I'm working on a lot of kind of like foundational stuff to try to build kind of like the core knowledge, and then I want to eventually get into more advanced stuff. And then as a traditional mystery school, I'm going to have my own stuff as well that isn't specific to any one particular practice. So a lot of the things we have right now, a 101 on occult symbolism, right? A little bit of symbolic literacy, history of the occult. How do we look back and see the growth of occult from one thing to the other? What constitutes the occult? What are some major time periods of occult history that you should know about? So a lot of the early stuff is foundational. I learned a lot about runes. I've learned a lot about palmistry and stuff like that. So I have a, kind of 101 foundational understanding of runes and symbolism. Palmistry primer. I have the Wheel of the Year, which was a lot more of a very interesting kind of deep dive than I expected. But it's not only just hey, this is what the Wheel of the Year is, and this is how to practice certain things in the Wheel of the Year. It also talks about kind of the history of some of where those traditions come from, because it is also very eclectic. It's from a bunch of different traditions that were kind of brought together to be one cohesive thing that is now attributed to the Wheel of the Year. But they were all kind of separate practices from different cultures. I'm working on a masterclass on kind of pagan history and tradition as well, because what a lot of people don't know is a lot of modern paganism is not a direct union with ancient paganism. A lot of it has been disrupted by history. And so the concept of this class is to teach, this is what ancient pagan religion looked like from a specific lens. And this is kind of how a modern interpretation of that is presented. Take heathenry, for example, right? Modern heathenry may be different in a lot of respects to what ancient Germanic religion looked like. Obviously, you know, similar deities, similar, you know, practices and stuff like that. But the concept of modern paganism is mostly about trying to redevelop and restructure those ancient religions and bring them into modern times. And so a lot of my classes, unfortunately, right now are not going to be particular to practice necessarily, aside from like, oh, I'm going to learn about runes so that I can do rune divination, or I can learn about palmistry so I can read palms, right? A lot of the classes are more about more of a scholarly understanding of occult institutions, because again, you know, kind of like what we were talking about, if you think about what it takes to be a student and practitioner of other religions, it takes a lot of kind of historical knowledge. You need to learn the roots, you need to understand the foundations before you can kind of go into the deeper things. And so a lot of my stuff is very foundational currently, and I am working with other experts to develop other practice type things. Like I said, I have a buddy who's going to be working on the Kabbalah, which is probably also going to be more of a scholarly take than it is going to be about a practice take. But that is kind of like the next evolution of the school is, let's stop talking about the how and why, and let's get into the actual practice eventually. So all that is coming in due time. I also have been developing what I consider kind of my 3 gateways of enlightenment, which kind of deal with going through a self-mastery process of disillusion, like, you know, shedding your former self, shedding your dogma, shedding shame, kind of get rid of the unauthentic side of you. And then the second gateway is alignment, essentially, not alignment. I'm still developing it, obviously. So the first one is like disillusion, right? Get rid of your former self. And then eventually you get into like shadow work. So shadow work, in my opinion, is a very important occult practice.
Yes.
So how do we practice shadow work? And how do we come to a realization that from a like Jungian psychology perspective, the idea of the shadow side is not to kill the shadow, it's to integrate it and to understand it in a way that actually empowers you. So the course that I'm kind of working on takes you through disillusion, it takes you through shadow work, and then eventually it is going to be about realignment. So how do we align with our true will, which also borrows a lot of kind of imagery and symbolism from Thelema, you know, not to like appropriate it in any way, but I do appreciate how concepts of Thelema attribute to true will and the understanding of alignment with true will. And so how do I help people go from I feel shame, I'm angry, I feel disillusioned, and then how do I transform that into I know exactly who my authentic self is, and I'm living as my authentic self. So that is kind of what I hope the mystery school starts becoming, is kind of a blueprint on using occult practice as a pathway to self-mastery.
Have you been reading Alice Bailey? Somebody's asking.
No, I have not.
Okay. Very nice.
If there are reading recommendations, though, always happy.
You know, one thing I did want to ask you about, I wanted to ask you earlier. I think it was very interesting that you brought it up. Can you talk a little bit about what I guess you mentioned Christian magic before? Could you maybe give it, you know, just talk about that a little bit, about what Christian magic is to you, or like how you see that, or types of magic? You know, can you let people know about Christian magic from your point of view?
Sure. One of the first books that I remember receiving as a gift that opened my eyes up to this idea was the Book of Oberon. And it is an Elizabethan magic grimoire from the 1500s that was developed during the time of Shakespeare. And it is a compilation of a bunch of different types of Christian ceremonial magic. And so if you think about some of the famous occultists like John Dee, for instance, who, you know, what's so fascinating is that he was the royal occultist to Queen Elizabeth I. She literally had her own alchemist occultist on hand to help, you know, read the stars to figure out when her coronation should be. They were practicing ritual magic that was paired with Christian theology. And it wasn't something that was very widely used from the historical research that I've done. It wasn't like everyone and their mom was doing Christian ceremonial magic. It was a lot more about who can actually get their hands on these grimoires and texts. And a lot of times that were people that were in the royalty, people that were associated with royalty or could get their hands on things like that. And so for me, it was kind of this eye-opening revelation to go from this is all evil to, wow, Christians are performing ceremonial magic. What the hell? And so I think that was a nice kind of step down for me, because it allowed me to look at something that was adjacent to my beliefs, but was also a huge step into a realm that I was completely unfamiliar with. And to this day, and the thing that's also very interesting is the grimoire actually talks about correspondences with other pagan deities as well. So it gives you a little bit of a primer on other beings that are outside of the Abrahamic religion. And there is a lot of syncretism in it, which kind of, you know, also points you into different directions based on what you're interested in. But there are sigil magic in there. There are rituals. There's ways to create your own incenses. They've got a bunch of lists of how to create your own different types of incenses. There is a consecration ritual in there that I still do for things, because I love to, if I want to do something with the intention of making it a magical practice, I want to be able to consecrate it, because I feel like consecrating things is very important. So, you know, there's a consecration ritual in there. But, you know, I think that if you're a Christian who is interested in magic, it's a good way to kind of peek just slightly outside and go, ooh, what is all this stuff out there? Because it does use, you know, Jesus Christ. It does use the angels. It does use familiar imagery that isn't going to spook you away. You're not just diving right into stuff that is completely foreign to you. So it's a good adjacent way to get into ritual ceremonial magic if you are coming out of like more of a fundamentalist concept of Christianity. And I really appreciated that. And I think that, again, it's kind of like a gateway to, well, if I can learn about this, what else is out there? And I think that's what the occult is. It's a constant question you're asking yourself of, okay, what else? Okay, what else? And it's a never ending question. I don't think there will ever be the end of that. What else is out there?
You know, thank you for adding all that. Appreciate that. It's just, even when I got into the occult, believe it or not, I was actually surprised when I noticed how much Christian and Catholicism, like there was people who just practice purely that style of magic. And I was like, oh, fuck, I didn't know. I just, you know, I don't think a lot of people know that, actually. You know, there's like, even like, I remember, I think they did a class on it at the lodge. Well, like Pennsylvania Dutch stuff. And I mean, that's a lot of like basically kind of almost like Christian magic. And like they were showing how, you know, like those mandalas that they make, a lot of those things are like on houses from back in the day. Like you see those things on the front of the houses. That was them kind of tossing up like their mark. I don't know if, you know, not everybody's putting them on their houses now for that reason, because they probably just think like, oh, it's decorative. You know what I'm saying? Because the house next door has it. So, but you know, back in the day, that was like them actually kind of like putting up like their thing, you know, and they were Christians, but they practiced some sort of witchcraft and magic. You know, so I think it's interesting. I just wanted to ask you that because I don't think a lot of people are, well, not in the occult community, but you know, I think there's a lot of people probably listen to my show that might be a little surprised that Christians have their own forms of magic.
Absolutely.
Or even how much the Psalms are used.
Yeah, yeah. There's psalms in the grimoire as well. They use psalms as part of the incantations and stuff.
Yeah, I know. Like, there's some people that just do psalm magic. You know,
It's one of the oldest. Yeah, that's sorry, Nick. That's one of the oldest, you know, texts of magic. Psalms are absolutely magic. Every single letter in Kabbalah. I mean, you can use Kabbalah to understand all the texts, all the Psalms. They have secret meanings. They have letters associated with them. They have certain flashing colors, even just verses. All the numerology is there. There are invocations. It's a simple tool. Like you can use it in a very folk magic sense, and then you can also use it in a much higher ritual magic sense, or even just a practical Kabbalah sense. If you're just doing like how I could do Kabbalah, not as magic, but as like a wisdom, there's a strictly conceptual wisdom science, like mandalas, like you brought up mandalas. You can just think of the tree like that. That's how I approach it more, just as like a series of meditations, colors, ideas. But you can definitely use the Psalms for that. So the people are always surprised. Like Psalms have an infinite potential almost. You could probably reconstruct the tree, to be honest, from the Psalms alone if you understood the numerological pattern. I'm not saying I understand it. I definitely don't. I'm just saying that it's there if you're high IQ and mathematical enough.
Well, there's also hoodoo too. You know, hoodoo uses psalms, and that's based off of Christianity as well. Well, it's like a blend of like African spiritual tradition and Protestantism. So that's also, I would argue, sort of a form of Christian magic as well.
Absolutely.
Forgot all about that.
Yeah, Nick, you and I did the series on Obeah, right? And like the DeLawrence Company and like all the Jamaican and Trinidadian sort of like syncretic tantric Christian Sufi folk magic from the Caribbean. So yeah, it's absolutely. I definitely agree with what Serena's saying. Like it's like the Jewish drugstore magic. Like they were the ones who sort of gave the Psalms to people buying like roots and candles. Absolutely. It's all pervasive. And because magic is better together. Like Dath is more of a syncretic Sephira, if you want to call it that. Like knowledge should go together. Knowledge makes sense together. It's not really meant to be separated. Doesn't mean it's all the truth. It just means that it should be in contour to each other so you can actually discern the truth.
Okay, so did anybody have any questions or anything they wanted to add? Anything? Judith, Serena, Jen, you're all good. All right. I think we could probably wrap it up here. Thank you all for coming on. It was really good talk. It was great to hear. It was nice to get to know you and hear what you're into and what you're doing. And I sure we could get you on in the future to talk about something else. I'd love to talk to you about your site even more, actually, down the road. So sounds really good, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, of course. No, thank you. Thank you. Serena, thank you for suggesting him. Good show. Judith, real quick, before we wrap it up, let everybody know they can find your amazing work.
First, thank you for coming on, and it was a pleasure meeting you. I wish you the best of success because we need a lot of mystery schools out there. So thank you very much. You can find me on YouTube under The Loon, or you can find me on X at The Loon 50. Thank you for having me.
Yes, no, thank you. Jen the Ninja, what's going on, sir?
Thank you so much, boss. And thank you, of course, Judith, and also Serena. This is our first time together on a live, but it was really nice to meet you. And your answers were actually really surprising, and I agreed with it all. Not that I wouldn't, but it just surprises me because there's very few women in the occult who I find to have very substantive sort of like, it's not just witchcraft. It's like much more substantive occult knowledge. So you really impressed me. Not that you should impress me, but I'm just saying you did. So thank you so much. And of course, Blake, thank you so much for being here. And I Really appreciate that you took my pushback, and it's not, I think you're doing a great thing. I like to be discursive, and that's just my way. I've been doing it. I don't know, maybe it's the astrology. I know Nick hates when we blame astrology for any of our personal qualms, and I do too. For the record, I do too. It's not an excuse. You can't be a shitty person just because whatever, Pluto is an Aquarius, but you have to Anyways, so the point is thank you so much. I appreciate it all. People can check me out, Threshold Saints. I have 2 episodes with Sochki dropping on February 2nd. So he invented crystal quantum computing that can work on 90s computers. So it's sort of self-emergent AI, very Kabbalistic. He's a Kabbalist. He's a chaos magician. He worked at CERN. He's kind of a crazy dude, but he's my friend. So I'm really excited for those to drop. And then so much coming up. I have an episode with Ike Baker coming out, and I'm sure I'll eventually talk to both Serena and Blake maybe down the road. So, and Nick's coming on for Mr. 93. So
93rd episode.
Yeah, let me shut that up. That's right, 93rd episode. So thank you so much. And Judith's coming on too. I just haven't figured it out. I'm very busy, but it's happening. So thank you guys all, and check me out, and obviously sub to the Mystery School and sub to Serena's channel as well. Thank you guys, appreciate it.
Yes, check out the Grey Lodge. Hell yeah.
Yeah, check out the Grey Lodge. Thank you, sorry Nick. Yeah, thank you so much. Check out the Grey Lodge Friday nights. February 13th. Will is the cause of fire.
Very nice, very nice. Thank you again, Jen. I always appreciate when you make the show. And Serena, what is going on? Please let everybody know where they can find your amazing work.
Thank you so much for having me on. And I'm glad I impressed you, Jen, because you do seem very discursive in your own words. So I take that as a gold star. You can find me on YouTube and Instagram under my full name. And I come check me out. And thank you so much for having me on.
No, thank you. Very much appreciated. I'm glad you came on. And definitely go check out our channel. Like I said, she's had some really good guests on there. She's had Mavis Lynn on there. Very jealous about that. So good for you. And yes. All right. Gentlemen Occultists, please let everybody know where they can find all of your stuff one more time.
Absolutely. Finally, thank you guys so much. It was such a pleasure to be here. Great meeting all of you. Serena, I enjoyed our conversation. I'm so happy that you were here with us tonight. It's so fun to hang out with you, and really I appreciate the back and forth, and I'm definitely not one to shy away from any type of pushback. I think the only way we continue to grow is to have constructive discourse, and to challenge ideas, and find a way to push to consensus. So thank you all so much. So much fun hanging out with you. I am the Gentleman Occultist on all platforms. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, even YouTube. To find my mystery school, I use a platform called School, SKOOL, and it is the Gentleman Occultist on that school platform. I will provide a link. The name of the school will change eventually, because kind of like what Serena had said, you're building something that exists beyond you. And the school was originally just for me to kind of build a place for us to hang out and talk. As it evolves, so is the whole concept of it. So it will have a name change to align with a more universal and future-proof existence. But for right now, it is the Gentleman Occultist on School as well. We're the #1 occult group on the platform.
That's what's up. Good for you. That is awesome. Nice stuff. One thing, like you said, I do think it's again, I have multiple people on the show because I just know very little bit about what I'm into. You know what I'm saying? So I have people from other angles or other beliefs come on the show because I think that makes a difference. I think you can learn from other people. So very well said, sir. And definitely go check out his. I don't know if your TikTok is like your Instagram, but definitely if you have Instagram, go check out his Instagram. He's got great reels. He does like little things on specific topics. I definitely think it's worth checking out. It might give you a bunch of ideas of things that you didn't know exist, or it's a good place to start. So definitely go check out his Instagram. I think it's well done. Good job, sir. Yeah. That's it. Everybody in the chat, thank you very much for showing up. Zachary Hubbard, I saw you were in there again. Mr. Gematria, I got to get you on the show at some point. Thank you very much for stopping by and blessing us with your presence. Yeah, that's what's up. And everybody else in the chat, that's why we go live. I appreciate the comments. I appreciate everything that's in there. And for the most part, people that are there from the beginning stay till the end. So that's what's up. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.